This conference will now be recorded.
Now exactly. See?
Good afternoon. This is Patty McCarthy Metcalf with Faces and Voices of Recovery. Thank you so much for joining us today for the fourth Friday webinar series. Today's webinar is Utilizing Peer Support in Probation Programs, Innovative Ways to Reduce Recidivism and Improve Recovery Outcomes. We're very pleased to have today Susan Broderick returning from last month, where she presented part one of this webinar. So we have a great interest in this topic. The webinar will focus on an innovative program currently underway in Denver, Colorado, between the Phoenix, which is a nonprofit sober active community organization with chapters across the country, as well as the Denver Department of Probation. And so our guest speakers today will talk about how they created that program and how you and your community can advocate for implementing programs like this. So this webinar is being recorded, so we will have the webinar available on our website for viewing at a future date. I also would like to encourage you to put your questions in the chat box. At the end of the webinar, we'll save time for questions for the presenters and comments that we'll share with them. And in addition, we'll be sending you an email with a link to an evaluation to tell us what you liked about the webinar and any ways we can improve. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the webinar over to our moderator for today, Susan Broderick. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Patty. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a pure delight to be back. And as Patty mentioned, I'm not sure if a lot of you joined us last month, but we started off, it was part one of utilizing peer support in probation programs. And what we realized when we were putting that together, excuse me, is that there was a lot to cover, so we decided to turn this into a part 1 and a part 2. And today I'd like to introduce the co-presenters that I have with me today. Scott Prendergast, who's probation manager with Denver Adult Probation Department, and Steve Discoli from the behavioral health, well, he's a behavioral health specialist with the Mile High Behavioral Health team. So we're very excited to be here, and I really want to get to talking with Steve and Scott about the work that they're doing, but I just want to provide a brief overview of what we discussed at the last during the last webinar, and looking at where we are today. So 2019, it truly is a unique moment in time, both in terms of where we stand in the recovery movement and where we stand in terms of criminal justice. And we know that, unfortunately, we are in the midst of an unprecedented opioid epidemic and just an addiction epidemic in general. But there are really some silver linings to this point where we are at. And we know today more research has come forward over the last 20 years. We know so much more today than we did 20 years ago about addiction as a chronic yet a preventable condition. We know that the prognosis for substance use disorders is actually quite good. The majority of people who seek help do achieve sobriety, maybe not immediately, but eventually. We also know that right now, criminal justice reform is happening across the country. It's one of the few issues that is getting bipartisan support on both the federal and state level. So it really is a unique moment in time to be looking at using recovery support throughout the justice system. Just in terms of my own background, for those of you who weren't here for the first webinar, I am a woman in long-term recovery, which for me means that I have not had a drink since July 15th, 2001. I also was a prosecutor for 14 years in the Manhattan DA's office, and it was during my years in Manhattan where it was a work hard, play hard environment, and I did both. And I was a deputy bureau chief who was basically a functional alcoholic, and I realized while I was there that I had a problem with alcohol, and I was very lucky because I went to a meeting on July 15th, and I have not had a drink since that meeting. So I know that given my role as a prosecutor and as a woman in long-term recovery, I'm very passionate about bringing the concept of recovery to the justice system, because I think for so long we focused on deficits and problems and locking people up, but not really looking at the transformative power of recovery. So I'm very excited right now that this is happening. We know that many people get involved in the criminal justice system because of substance use. And, depending on which statistics you're looking at, it can be anywhere up to 80 to 90% of those involved in the system have some sort of substance use disorder. And back in 2010 was an opportunity that I had to meet John Kelly, who now runs the Recovery Research Institute at Harvard, Mass General. And it was one of the first times that I heard a researcher talking about the opportunity that exists within the justice system to turn a life around. I know from my own experiences in recovery, I have never met anybody who got clean or sober because things were going great. Very often, it's because of a consequence. And for many people, that consequence is an arrest or a referral to the justice system. So what I am hoping to do through this webinar and working with all of you across the country is finding ways to use that leverage of the justice system in a positive way, as a way to turn a life around. For those of you who are not familiar with John Kelly's work, here's a link to his website. He is not only a brilliant researcher, but he provides this information in a very understandable way. He every day is putting out new studies and just really helping to make sure that there's a greater understanding across the country about what recovery is. For so long, we've just maybe focused on addiction and or treatment, but I think we're finally coming to the point of recognizing that recovery is really how we sustain these changes and how we live a better life. One of the things that John had mentioned to me at one point when I talked to him about the magical fact that I went to a meeting and I haven't had a drink since my first meeting, and I basically attributed it to a miracle, and John said, well, it may have been a miracle, but it may have also been that you had very high recovery capital. I had no idea what recovery capital was at that point, and so of course I started looking into it. And for those of you who have not heard of this term, it was first defined back in 2008. Basically, it's your internal and external resources that can be drawn upon to both initiate and sustain recovery. And it's focusing more on the assets. And to me, that was so important in early recovery, is having hope and that belief that things can get better. And looking at the things that I had, not only internally, but socially. I was very lucky. I had a good support network of both my family and friends and colleagues were very supportive of my recovery. So about 2 years ago, I came across the work of another researcher who is working over in the UK, and he is also part of the Recovery Research Institute. His name is David Best, and he's a criminologist who has been studying the parallels between recovery from addiction and desistance from offending. And every time I mention the word desistance to my prosecutor friends, they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, basically reducing recidivism. So basically, recovery parallels reducing recidivism. And, when we look at both recovery from addiction and stopping offending, they both involve change on the inside and the outside. So what that means is that we have to find both changing the way we're thinking about ourselves, but then also changing people, places, and things. One of the most powerful points of one of David Best's studies was talking about the fact that with most other illnesses or conditions, the goal is to get back to well. When you go to the doctor, you want to get well. But what he found in looking at the long-term outcomes of a lot of people in recovery is that it's not a remission to a normal state, but rather a transcendence to a state that can be best characterized as better than well. And when I just remember reading that, and it just really resonated, because I know for myself and for so many of my friends in recovery, that's what life has become, is it's better than we've ever expected. So David Best is very involved in work looking at those in the criminal justice system who have substance use disorders. And one of his studies is the Second Chance study. And it looked at both, those changes, those mechanisms that have to change on both the internal and external level. And in this case, they looked at developing a positive sense of identity, improvements in physical health and well-being, developing positive social networks, role models, and again, a sense of hope and positive vision for the future. So I mentioned last time a little bit about this program. One of the things that I should also mention is that I have the great fortune of being on the board of the Phoenix, which I had heard about back at a meeting in 2013. I was at a meeting with prosecutors in Colorado, and they were talking about a program that they were using within their drug courts and probation. And it was started, it's a program that was started by Scott Strode. He had gone to treatment in Boston back in 1997. And when he came out of treatment, realized or asked himself, what am I going to do with my free time? And soon realized that he couldn't go back to the same people, places, and things. And so Scott put in motion an organization that truly, to me, epitomizes what recovery is all about. And it's about being stronger than the problem and looking at the solution. And so We talked about it a little bit last time about the program that Phoenix is now doing with Denver Probation. And here is our Phoenix champion, who unfortunately she couldn't join us today. This is Dana Smith. She is the regional manager for Phoenix, and she's actually giving the plenary address today at the Colorado Criminal Justice Conference. Dana has an amazing story of resilience and strength, and Scott and Steve work with her closely. The three of them actually presented yesterday at the Colorado Criminal Justice Program about this program. So this is a slide about the Phoenix. There's the website there, www.thephoenix.org. But at this point, let me hand it over to Scott and Steve to talk about your program. Oh, wait, let's go back. Are you guys there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Scott, why don't you just tell us a little bit about how the specialized drug offender program got started?
All right, thank you, Susan. Back in 2016, our department found ourselves going through a little bit of a crisis. We had seen a 30% increase in the felony filings. And just for clarification, our probation department only supervises adult felony cases. We are not a combined court. We just deal with adult felony cases out of our district court. And we had seen a 30% increase in the number of felony filings year after year after year, but our staffing level maintained at about 75%. Back when this program started, we were short about 17 officers. So when these cases came in, our probation officers in our regular supervision unit came to us and they were feeling overwhelmed. They didn't feel that they had the time necessary to spend with clients that they saw as high risk, high need, that were substance use disordered. And they wanted to know why these cases, these clients, were not being transferred to our drug court. Denver has one of the oldest and longest running drug courts in the nation, also one of the largest. And back at that time, we had approximately 800 clients in our drug court program. What we came to realize is that number exceeded our resource availability that we had, and we were over capacity, and we needed to start trimming numbers. So not only was our drug court overpopulated, our regular probation was overpopulated with clients that needed a lot of help, and we didn't think that we were doing a great job meeting the needs of those clients. So my chief, Dr. Carrie Heck, called me in, and Dr. Heck challenged me to come up with a solution to meet the needs of our clients and our community. But his only guiding advice was to be innovative, improve outcomes, and not be beholden to pre-established rules or protocols. The fact that we were so short-staffed, we couldn't meet the standards for number of contacts or other requirements that were spelled out in our system. And he wanted to do things differently. He wanted to be innovative. So what we did is we started looking at what the numbers, we had to quantify the problem. We had to actually see that the anecdotal responses from our officers of feeling overwhelmed could actually be replicated by looking at our data. So we went and we ran a bunch of different reports based upon level of supervision, treatment level crime, to figure out what we're actually dealing with. And the one number that really stuck out to us as the biggest problem. So not only did we have a 30% increase in cases, not only were we staffed at about 75%, but the biggest issue that we had is 64% of our high-risk, high-need, substance use disordered clients in our drug court absconded from supervision. And that number was pretty startling to us that 64% of them did not engage with us, didn't want to engage, didn't feel that there was hope, and they absconded. They took off. So we thought, well, interesting. We're going to have to address that. And if I just create another treatment program and I have pretty good therapists and pretty good POs, and we come up with another treatment modality, would that be enough? And I tried to figure out what was missing. And that's when I came across Johan Hari's TED Talk on everything you thought you knew about addiction was wrong. And although I didn't agree with all the points that Mr. Hari makes, especially with regards to legalizing drugs, his point about Rat Park and that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection, really resonated with me. That was the missing link for us. The criminal justice system and probation particularly, we're very good at setting rules, and those rules are necessary in the beginning. And Susan, you had alluded to it earlier. We ask people to change people, places, and things. We tell them they can't hang around their old friends, they can't go to their old areas anymore, and they have to change their behaviors. And that's the model that we worked with for a long time in our department, and we thought we were doing our due diligence, but what I realized is that we created a void in the life of our clients. And so many of our clients would tell me that they didn't know if sobriety was worth it, because to them, sobriety was isolation. Sobriety was boring. They were living in their parents' or their grandparents' basements. They always described it as dark, lonely, depressing. Yeah. And I thought, if I can go ahead and I create rules that through our terms and conditions that say all the things that they can't do anymore, I think I have a moral obligation to fill up that void and fill it with something positive and something to give them hope. Yeah. But I didn't know what that meant. I'm not the expert in the field. We just realized that we had a problem. So what I needed to do is I needed to form a team. I needed to find people in the community that shared the same passion that our department did to help me solve this problem. So I was lucky enough, during this time, I was the supervisor of our problem-solving court, our drug court. So I had a lot of connections in the community with different programs. Some were good, some were bad. Any advice I could give is, if you are an administrator or a supervisor, get out of your office, go and meet your stakeholders in the community and get to know people. And don't just ask them for their modalities and all the contractual stuff that you have to. Have a cup of coffee with them and find out what their passion is. So when I set about trying to find my connections in the community, we have an opioid epidemic. And in Denver, we are so fortunate to have a relationship with Denver Health. It's our public hospital. They also provide the medical services in our jail. And 5 or 6 years ago, they partnered with me to create the first methadone induction program, jail-based, for probationers that were going to be released from the jail to the community. And I thought I needed them on board. And I asked if they would partner with us, and I didn't know what the program would look like yet, but would they be involved? And they said yes. I went to Mile High. I had a relationship with Steve, who you'll hear from in a minute. He's sitting beside me. He's the main therapist at one of our treatment providers, and he was the main contact for our drug court. And Steve has an incredible passion for this work and an incredible amount of empathy, and he's able to connect very well with clients. So I know I needed him on board as well. But then that last piece about community and being connected and having something positive still stuck with me. And I remember the day I first met Dana Smith, the regional director of Phoenix. Our court had always used Phoenix, but we would make referrals to Phoenix. So from our court, we'd say, you need to go over to the Phoenix. And we'd give them this referral, this piece of paper, and we'd hope that they went. We hope we'd find out how it went for them, but we never went with them. So one day Dana stopped by my office. She was visiting someone else, and she introduced herself. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm aware of you. And she goes, well, how come you don't like us? And I said, what are you talking about? I think you guys are great. We refer people there all the time. And Dana said, but you never show up. And I said, well, and then it was honest, and it was great feedback. And I scrambled for an answer, but the answer was, in our traditional model, I thought there was a boundary issue where this was a resource for a client in the community. And traditionally, we made referrals to the resources, but we also didn't show up because we were worried about some sort of therapeutic boundary, and we didn't want to overstep. And Dana corrected me pretty quickly and said, there's a power struggle, there's a relationship issue when they always come to your office. You should really meet your clients over here and work out with them. Break sweat with them. Struggle with them. Let them see that you're human too, and you may find that your relationship will be a lot better with your clients. That was really eye-opening for me, to get out of my office and to really meet clients where they are at. And that right there, I think, is probably the framework for the program that we created, the Specialized Drug Offender Program, was to create a program where clients felt valued, they had hope, people cared about them. We did what we could to remove roadblocks that traditionally were there for their success. And we created a quasi-community. So many of them felt isolated. So we mandated that they all went to treatment at the same place and in the same group. That if they wanted a medication-assisted treatment, an MAT, that they went to one place. That if they wanted pro-social activity, that they should utilize the services of the Phoenix. And that was all done purposefully because we wanted them to have as much interaction with themselves on an ongoing basis to create a positive community that they could rely upon. And that was the impetus for us to create the Specialized Drug Offender Program.
That's great. And now, so you have the probation officers actually going to the Phoenix?
We do. So the other thing that we looked at is what are some of the traditional roadblocks that a client who has a substance use disorder encounters while they're in the criminal justice system. And transportation is one.
Right.
Having a cell phone is another. Money, employment, lack of stable housing, pro-social connections, scared to submit a urine screen if it might test positive. So what we did is we had to look at those barriers and ask ourselves, are we helping or hindering in this process? And by making them come to the fortress of probation, we're in downtown Denver. There's very little parking around our building. We have armed security in our lobby. You have to go through a metal detector. Without a joke, our elevators are rarely working, and people have to sit and wait downstairs. When they do get up to our floor, they are greeted behind bulletproof glass. They have to sit and wait. The probation officer will come out and see the client. They have a scheduled appointment, and then they're told a list of things that they have to do. They have to go to a treatment provider based upon a list that we give them. They have to call every morning at 6 a.m. to see if they have to submit a random urine screen that day. And we tell them these are the things they have to do, and then you have to bring me in verification that you completed those things by your next appointment. Not very welcoming, not very positive, not very supportive. and we weren't taking into consideration where they were in their life. So the Specialized Drug Offender Program came up with the idea that they would have one group orientation, again, the group theme, that all clients would come in for orientation where they would be, they would meet their probation officers, they would meet their MAT provider, they would meet their treatment provider, they would meet a representative from Phoenix, they would go over the rules of the program, the terms and conditions, and at that meeting, they would have a chance to talk to their team that was going to help them through this process. And the roadblocks were eliminated where we'd give them their intake at that appointment, so they didn't have to figure out where treatment was and go and do their intake. And then after that meeting, all other appointments, the probation officer had to go to the client, not the client going to the probation officer. So the probation officer would meet clients at Phoenix for a workout. We secured an ongoing slot every Monday at 10 a.m. with the Phoenix, where we meet our clients there. We have the gym to ourselves, and then we work out with them, and then we can talk with them, and then they have the opportunity to meet with a recovery coach from the Phoenix to talk about any other issues that are going on. Probation is also co-located at our treatment provider. That was something that was different and new. Having probation offices within the treatment provider, not a lot of treatment providers were on board with that. Steve was a big proponent of that in his agency because we had to show a united front. We had to show that we were all working together on their sobriety and to show that we're all on one page and remove those roadblocks for them. Another thing that we did, which goes against standard literature, would be we did away with random urine screens. Can you imagine your life is run by when you have to drop a UA, but you don't know if you have to drop a UA that day until you call, but you don't have a phone? You don't have transportation. You don't have money to get down there. The anxiety that produces. So we set up a standard urine screen drops of every Monday and every Thursday. The urine screens now will detect drugs 3-4 days in the system. If somebody was going to use and they were using at a level that was negatively impacting their life, you're going to catch a positive UA on Monday or Thursday. And that was to work with the clients to really understand the difference between distal and proximal goals. A lot of them wouldn't drop or engage because what was the sense? They were high anyways. And that wasn't the point, because sobriety was going to be a distal goal for them. But dropping a UA and just getting into the habit of showing up at treatment and complying with what they needed to, that was something that was proximal and within their control. And it gave them small victories within their recovery that they could be successful. It was just redefining what success meant for them at that time.
Right. And I can imagine that working out with your probation officer had an impact on the relationships between probation officer and probationer. Have you seen that?
Definitely. This is Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you? Them being able to meet with probation at treatment prior to a group is revolutionary because it's a more relaxed environment. They're not coming down to probation. They're not going through security. They're not trying to find a parking spot. All of that. It's a much more relaxed meeting. And if need be, I'll sit in the meeting with them. And, it has definitely increased the interaction between probation and the clients and made it a more positive experience.
Yep. Well, and here I have, so now Dana, who isn't she's at the conference today. But now she's very much involved in this as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so Steve, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how, your involvement with this?
Yeah, sure. I originally was the primary for drug court.
The primary treatment
Therapist for
Okay.
drug court.
Okay.
Drug court used at that time 3 treatment providers. We were one of them. And in relationship to my agency, I was in charge of all drug court clients. Scott gave you some stats concerning the success of drug court clients, and I had become, frustrated also. The SDOP program provided a new platform with the added component of increased client success.
I'm putting up your slide. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. And the thing that I loved about it is when I was able to sit down with Scott and the probation team was, first of all, just to be involved in what the treatment modality would look like is, something treatment is really never involved with. When I say treatment modality, it's the phases of the SDOP program. But it's really encompassing of a holistic approach of mind, body, and soul, dealing with the client from a dimensional point of view rather than just an addiction point of view.
Yep. That's so important.
And talk about during orientations about, hopefully this will be the last probation you ever do.
Absolutely. It's really, and so now I want to talk about, what are the results that you're getting and what are the numbers and is this program a success?
So we like to think so. So we have seen the numbers I'll get to in a sec, but anecdotally, meeting with clients and the feedback we get from our clients and what they share about how their lives have changed, how they feel that they have hope, how they feel that they have dignity. That is so rewarding to hear that message. So part of our phase program is each client, in order to progress from phase 2 into phase 3, is they have to write out a goodbye to drugs letter. And they can do it in any format they want. We've had beautifully written letters. We've had poems. We had one client who did a rap.
Really?
That was pretty amazing. And just hearing those stories about what their quality of life was like pre-SDOP program and what it was like now with just a little bit of sobriety and how they now have hope in their lives and they're feeling very positive about themselves was just amazing for us. So we have had 500 clients go through our program in the 2 years. And the biggest number for me that I really hang this program's hat on, I alluded to it earlier. We had 64% of our high-risk, high-need substance use clients had absconded. A lot of our SDOP clients had failed out of drug court, had failed out of probation previously. And 2 years later, that 64% absconder number reduced to 16%.
Wow.
So just to clarify, how we ran that number is if our team met with them one time, if they only attended the orientation, we counted them as an active participant in our group. And of the 500 clients that attended one orientation just once, and having a probation officer, a treatment provider, an MAT provider, somebody from the Phoenix, all in the room with them, supporting them. Oh, and we also bring in a peer, somebody who's currently in the program, to work through any of their ambivalence or fear so they could tell them from a client perspective what the program offers them. If they did that just one time, an hour and a half meeting, only 16% of them, while dealing with homelessness, while dealing with no transportation and no cell phone and a lack of funds and dealing with a substance use disorder, only 16% of them absconded from us. The rest worked the program.
Wow. That's amazing.
I can tell you from a treatment point of view that, every participant of this probation program, we have a community group so everybody in the SCOP program attends a community group in addition to the rest of their treatment. And I've had practically every client tell me that that's the one group they look forward to. That's the one group that saves their life, because it's just peers. And if, who's ever struggling, you have that many other people in the room, you have their points of view to help you.
Absolutely. Well, I remember that even when I got not only when I got sober, when I also, and I think I shared this during the last webinar, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and with my recovery and with my breast cancer, the people I wanted to talk to were the people that were on the other side, the people who had lived through it, because they were living proof to me. Oh wait, what happened? Did that go away? Hello?
It looks like it went away.
Huh. Let's try it.
I'm looking at it. I don't see why. I think it was on your end, maybe.
Huh. I didn't touch anything.
Um,
Okay, let's try to get it back. Here we go. Can you see it?
no.
Huh. Okay.
Usually, there's a two-step process. You have to select the screen and then confirm it to bring up the visual here.
Oh. Oh well.
Could it be hidden under another window, Susan, that you're not seeing to open it, reopen it?
Huh. What is going on here? I'm trying to escape. I can't. Patty, can you pull it up on yours?
Sure.
Because I don't know what happened. Because I wasn't touching the thing. Well, anyway, what I was trying to say was that, just that importance of somebody who has lived through what you're currently struggling with and is on that other side, for me, has always been the most important source of hope. And that's where I think seeing now and in recovery and in the justice system, just how important peers are in terms of recovering from addiction and in reducing offending.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so, the screen again? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Are you back? Do we have the screen up? I just want to make sure.
We do.
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone can see it now.
Okay, great.
So
I'm on the live chain.
About what you just shared is that it's twofold about what we're doing. So it's the community group, it's a sense of community, which, even if you're struggling and other people in your community are doing well, you want to know what they're doing. Because you're having people that have come in with your orientation group that all of a sudden that are achieving and maintaining sobriety. And you're left on the fringes.
Yep.
So you're able to turn to them for help. And the fact that you talked about wanting to deal with people on the other side is there are people within those groups that have been in early orientation groups that have, maintained sobriety for a while.
Yep.
And that's just like our orientation group that we hold at probation, the very first meeting, is by having somebody who's actively involved in the program, because that way you're able to look at this and be, oh, this program is for real. This program will help me.
Exactly. It gets street cred, you know?
Exactly. Definitely street cred.
So, well, and Patty, I don't know. I know that we wanted to allow some time for questions. Do you want us to try to wrap up now with some final thoughts and then open it up for questions?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I'll just move to the next slide and then we'll see if anybody has any questions. I have not seen any come in yet. So
Okay.
for all our participants, we have a few more minutes. Well, we have 10 more minutes anyway to take questions. So please put them in the chat box.
Yeah, and so, well, and I'll give both Scott and Steve a chance to give some final thoughts. But one of the things that I really wanted to make clear during both the first and this webinar is the fact that the justice system plays a pivotal role in addressing addiction and promoting recovery. And, I know that there's a lot of people who have a negative view of the justice system, but I can say that in the work I've seen, I've also seen the justice system responsible for turning many, many lives around in a positive way. So for the advocates out there, I would just encourage you to be working with those within your justice system, because very often, as you can see here, we have very dedicated probation officers and treatment providers, and we all want to be part of the solution here. We want to work in turning lives around and helping people, and that is better for our community as well. So Scott and Stephen, if you have any more final thoughts or any advice that you'd give to the viewers in terms of if they want to start something like this in their communities, that would be great.
I would probably say the biggest thing that you should keep in mind is dare greatly. Don't be afraid to break away from traditional models, from the way you've always done stuff. Get out and know your community. Get out and know the resources in your community and actively seek out those stakeholders that share your vision and your passion. That is what you need. And then for my officers that started this program with me, I didn't get a chance to touch on that. You can have all the stakeholder buy-in, but your officers have to have the right mentality. So I was so fortunate to have probation officers that had the same passion and level of buy-in and willingness to start a new program, not knowing what it would look like, except more work for them.
Yeah.
They had to be out in the field a lot. They had to work off laptops. They had to work out of treatment providers. That was not a normal safe space for them. So having, like, Wes Schweitzer was one of my original probation officers. He's still running the program, and having him buy into it and really become an advocate for it. That is so important, that not only do you choose the right people in the beginning, but you also have succession planning, that you have other people that know about the program and they want to become part of the program, and they share that same passion. So we have new officers in the program now that have the same level of passion and energy that our original officers had. That is so important. So don't be afraid to do things differently. I am blessed that I got a chief that only cares about outcomes and only cares about doing right by our community and our clients. And to have that freedom, the concept of ownership and authorship over a program, where you get to own your own program and you get to write the rules for your own program, really inspires people to want to be involved and to do good. And they really want to change the way we're doing things. So that'd be my advice for anybody out there who wants to start a program, would be really know your partners in the community, really build a sense of culture and community around being positive and doing the right things, and don't listen to any of the naysayers that don't like what you're doing because it goes against the traditional model.
Yeah, and just to sort of piggyback off of what Scott said, it's really about having the right people. We are very fortunate that we have a great relationship with probation. And, when Scott talked about having the right people, you need to have the right people that understand addiction, that are very client centered, willing to meet the client where they're at. Because people that don't view things that way, that come from a very punitive point of view, may not be as successful in this.
Absolutely. And I think something that Scott said in the beginning really is so important when we're doing this work, in terms of, we create these rules that we have to change. You have to change your people, places, thing. You're basically changing your life, and that does create a void. But one of the most important things that I've seen in the work in the criminal justice system is, and this is with adolescents and adults, is when we're talking to the people to find out, what is it that brings them joy, that makes them come alive. And I know for a lot of people, working out and the physical fitness piece is really important, but not everybody wants to go work out, but there's always something. I was speaking to somebody the other day from Nashville, and she's running a program for adolescents down in Nashville. But one of the things that they found is that the youth in her community, when she talked to them about, like, what do you dream of being? And she said a lot of them want to go into the music industry. And so they have worked out something with a recording industry, a recording studio in Nashville, where they donate time and they go in there. So again, it's filling that void with positive things and things that make people want to stay sober, and recognize just how transformative this process is, and giving them the sense of hope and purpose, I think, is so critical to not just initiating change, but sustaining it long term, because that's what we're looking to do. We want to sustain recovery, and we want to sustain people able to live a law-abiding life and to really flourish in life. So I think it's incredible right now what's going on, and programs like this one. I hope that we can have more of them happening all across the country.
This is fantastic. I appreciate all of your information. I want to jump into some questions, because we now have questions, and we have just a few minutes. So first, I think there's been a lot of positive comments. Love the information that people are receiving. One added that, would you be willing to speak nationally to other probation departments at a national level, like on a tour of sorts, because spreading this message would be great. And I know we have your contact information here, Susan. So folks that are interested, your contact information is now up on the screen. I'm not sure if you could, Susan, but for the people participating today, if you want to visit Susan's website or email her, her email is there. I know that you do quite a bit of speaking, don't you? Right, Susan?
Yeah. And one of the things, we are going to be at the National Drug Court Conference. And that obviously is not part of this, but actually Dana Smith will be there. And Scott, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to come, but it would be great to have you. And I do think, and it's that whole peer-to-peer message, because I think that when we're working with prosecutors and probation officers, they need to hear from other prosecutors and probation officers that this actually works, that it not only turns lives around, but it enhances community safety. So I'm sure we can help and bring this message across to communities all over the country, and would love to do that.
Awesome, thank you. So another question says, your new probation program is not limited to drug court clients. Are individuals court ordered, or is it voluntary?
More voluntold. So these are clients not in our drug court. So we still have a very active and robust drug court. This is for clients that are not eligible for our drug court or otherwise didn't get into it. So we don't care what the charge is. Our program isn't age related or gender related. It is just for anyone who is high risk, high need substance use disorder, as determined by the ACES-R and LSI assessments. We take all those clients in. So we run a drug court. This is just to support what our drug court does and just reaching more clients that are in need.
Okay, thank you. A couple other questions. This is a question posed to the Denver people. It says, hold on a minute, and I'm not familiar with this, so you might be, NADA auricular detox recovery present in your programs? This is a Virginia probation officer wondering about that in terms of your programming there in Denver.
So we have access to a detox program that we can put clients into. We're also very fortunate that in our jail, we have a treatment program that is jail-based. So if a client needs a period of stabilization prior to release to the community, they would be in our RISE program. And they could be in our RISE program for 30, 60, 90 days. It's more of a springboard into treatment. They also get access to a mental health professional, and they can be started on an MAT, medication-assisted treatment, while they're in jail prior to release to the community. So we'll use that more as our detox stabilization, the concept of purposeful incarceration. We don't just want to put people in jail to get our pound of flesh, but sometimes it's necessary in order to facilitate the therapeutic intervention. But we do also have access to a detox center in lieu of going to jail.
Great, thank you. Another question is, does this program also have family supports?
That is something that we are currently investigating. We do use peer coaching within our program, and we are looking to implement a family advocate, if you will, that'll help the family deal with their own set of issues.
Great. All right. Thank you. And then another question is, are you working with anyone in Pennsylvania? Is there something similar in Pennsylvania that you're aware of? I know that one of our agents who works with sex offender often meets with them during, before, after their treatment group.
No, we're unaware of anybody else running a program like this. Not that it doesn't exist. But that is a great idea to be co-located with your treatment providers for all types of offenders. And in fact, our SDOP model here in Denver was a pilot program, and it is now the basis for how we're doing all probation, where we're getting officers to go out in the community and be with a domestic violence provider and meet clients there, or a mental health. We have our officers meet our mental health clients at our mental health centers. Our sex offender officers also meet clients at the sex offender treatment provider. So that's a model that we saw work with SDOP, that by reducing barriers and working with clients and working collaboratively with our stakeholders, we'll get better outcomes. And in fact, our numbers were dire to begin with, that we were short 17 officers, staffed at 75%. Our felony filings have increased year after year, 30% each year since we created the program. My department is now short 24 officers. We're staffed at less than 70%, but by embracing this model of reducing roadblocks and really meeting clients where they are at physically and mentally, our success rate increased 9% overall in our department.
That's
Wow.
amazing. And just as one final thought, I wanted to mention the fact that the Phoenix is also working with the sheriff up in Massachusetts in Lowell, and that sheriff saw the opportunity of Phoenix and found space within his office and converted that to a gym where they now can check in there and work out together with the probation officers. So again, I think it's getting the message out there as well to advocates that very often some of your most vocal and powerful champions for recovery are the local justice leaders. So I would encourage everybody to be reaching out to those probation officers, sheriffs, law enforcement officers within your community, because we all have a role to play in helping turn lives around.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan, Scott, and Steve. This has been a very, very good information. Lots of great ideas, and I'm sure that you'll have people reaching out to you to follow
Please do. Yeah.
Well, this webinar has been recorded, and we will be posting it on our website. Feel free to email us if you have additional questions. And please, you will be receiving a link to an evaluation. It's just a quick 3-question, or actually it's more than that. But anyway, it's an evaluation to let us know how we're doing and what areas you'd like to see new information and how we can improve our webinars. So thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now. All right, bye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.